Welcome to my channel, The Magic of Java. This is an extract from my first book, The Green Queen from Java. It's a novel, it's a tale, a yarn intended to entertain you. Yes, it does reflect my experience of falling in love with Indonesia, my experience of falling in love with an Indonesian lady, and my increasing awareness of the paranormal and black magic, or some might like to say my descent into madness. But it is just a novel. Any resemblance to real people is completely unintentional. Yes, it's based on my experience, so yes, it's based on people I've met and know, but amalgams or caricatures of them. I do mention real people and real-life celebrities and hope that they, along with anybody who believes they've identified themselves, will forgive me. I did believe our home to now be more balanced. Not least, I could not feel the overpowering forces that I once had, especially in the kitchen. But Maddie and Bude were still suffering from pains and extreme heat. Sometimes these pains felt like needles, other times poking, perhaps most disturbingly, often in and around their vaginas. Maddie occasionally even developed bruises on her thighs in the shape of the fingertip that was poking her. Much later, one Thursday evening after prayers, I developed a bruise. I know the exact moment occurred, and I know that I had not accidentally hit anything as I walked home down our gang. It simply appeared. I was aware of the experience, but to me it didn't feel like poking, more like being shot with a distinct electrical thermal sensation. I associate the bruise with an attack, or something entering my body. Despite everything that was happening being completely outside my Western terms of reference, certain patterns would emerge that could be predicted using Western logic, or at least my Western logic with its love of repetition and relationships. The physical effects would begin on a Monday evening, accumulate on a Thursday night, and be largely gone by Saturday. They would move between Bude and Maddie, so that when Bude was bad, Maddie felt little. I later realised that they were being sent on a Monday and Thursday, especially after Maghrib, and some of the physical effects appearing up to a few days later as they were leaving our bodies. Maddie had discovered that prayer helped, just as Pa Angabaya had told her it would. During her prayer she would begin to burp, something this Javanese girl would never do in public. Later it turned to farting, something she would not even do in private. Sometimes the burping accumulated in coughing something up or being sick. There was nothing much to see, although later it was mixed with a little blood. One night Maddie dreamt of a red naga dragon had appeared on a piece of paper on the Javanese calendar in our hall. Her mother had appeared with a tiger, which, although greatly challenged by the naga, eventually the tiger killed the naga and it burst into flames. Ibu Dianti had called to ask how Maddie was, and when Maddie repeated this dream to her, she said that it was very bad. I have later learned that the tiger symbolises that how we should lead ourselves. We need to act wisely and control our appetite to achieve a better life. To not act as a tiger and be unable to control our appetite has fatal consequences. I also wonder if Maddie misinterpreted the red naga and it was actually a red snake, which would make far more sense to me. The next day, another package arrived, this time in Banyumas. Just a letter, simply with numbers on it. Mass Predictor called the number, but it was unobtainable. The funny thing is, the parcel had Paerte's name on it. Admittedly a common name in Java. In fact, the Javanese name Maddie's own father had taken. Also, Who would know Bude's address in Banyamas? Very few people would, except those closely related to us, although it could probably be traced by the police or anyone working in local government if they put their name to it. Later that day, Sawadi found a green snake in his bathroom, something that has never happened before. Although small green snakes would not be unheard of in Banyamas, nor indeed in people's homes. As Sawadi tried to dispatch the snake, it attacked him, but he severed it before it could strike. It was most likely one of the most poisonous and aggressive snakes found in Java. The Banyamas pa-ustads that Sawadi had found also clearly weren't working beyond the first day, and Bude needed to find someone else to help her. Mas Pradipta suggested a Dukan in Gunung Kidul, a Nenek in his desa who refused to be called Nenek, insisting on the Javanese Umba. So they moved from Banyamas to Gunung Kidul. We got a call from Bude to say that whilst she had not been totally purged, she was much better. She needn't have called. Madi was much worse. So we already knew what had happened. The Umba had removed several foreign objects from Bude's body, but there were more. She had also said, like all pa-ustads Bude had visited, that the spirits were Chinese and therefore more difficult to command. Bude also explained that Ibu had appeared before them, saying that she hated Bude for marrying Mas Pradipta and was jealous of Madi and her extreme wealth. Furthermore, Madi had never been forgiven for cutting off Ibu access to our water pump. Umba had said that she sent back the spirits and that the money that Ibu and Pa-Erte had asked to come to them from us would flow the other way. Given that they had nothing, this really wasn't something to look forward to. Even this was hardly news. I'd heard Ibu along our gang calling a Dukan Santet one evening and mentioning Made's name, not wanting her relatives, who she shares a house with, to hear her. Also on a visit to Gunung Kidul, our standing maid had heard Pa-Erte asking Ibu if it could be sent over seas, as we'd told everyone we were going to Thailand. So the smiling Omuni was innocent after all. In fact, the journey to Gunung Kidul had been shortly after a flight, on AirAsia rather than Zebra Air, for our new home Selamatan, a feast whose origins were in the animistic sacrifice, but developed by Sunan Bonang, and has been embraced by the Nahdlatul Ulama. Salamatem are often used to clean a home, marriage, or important events of evil spirits. Although ritual feasts are found elsewhere in Islam, it symbolises the differences with the Muhammadiyah, who oppose such antiquated practices. Academics describe a division between the Shantri and the Purtrian, pure or white ones, reflecting the use of white skull caps, although in Indonesia the word Shantri is used to mean pupil of an Islamic boarding school, and Abangan, the red ones, to describe Islamics in Indonesia, but few recognise this distinction, possibly because admitting to being Abangan could be dangerous. I have even seen it suggested that Muhammadiyah follow a Wahhabist doctrine. While some Muhammadiyah, particularly west of Java, may define themselves in this way, many other Muhammadiyah in Java would define themselves as Sufi. Certainly these distinctions are too polarised to explain the difference is between Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. In any case, their congregations tend to be somewhat interchangeable, myself included, and Muhammadiyah masjids are common in strongholds of Kujawan, such as Made's Desa. Sawadi sacrificed a goat for the feast with a golok knife, but Madi put a foot down on displaying its head in our house, as was the tradition. I have often joked about keeping a pet goat that I would put in a petchy hat and call it Professor Darwin, but seeing the fate of this goat has made the joke seem nothing like as funny. Whilst the goat was deep fried and eaten by the dresser, the largest proportion was kept by the Duke and brother and his immediate family, who in a very Javanese form seemed to be challenging my understanding of the boundary between my obligation for zakat and their own personal greed. This is a boundary to which I have alluded many times, and one which I must negotiate on a daily basis as a Muslim bule living in Indonesia. My morals concerning the fate of the goat are therefore simply false Western compassion, especially when overshadowed by the obligation for zakat. Almost the whole desa appeared at our house the evening of the Selamatan, who we had to provide with food, soft drinks and cigarettes, and parcels were sent to those unable to attend. As is normal in Indonesia when there is a special event, yellow rice is shaped into a large cone, tupeng, the yellow colour coming from kunit or turmeric, which is decorated with sculptured fruits and vegetables. Prayers were offered, dikir, not strictly the Arabic prayers I hear in the masjid or at Selamatan elsewhere in Indonesia, but with some similarities, and we paid Mas Perwa, MC Java, to address the desa, as my Bahasa would not have been adequate. In any case, Javanese was expected. In this part of Java, traditionally this is done by a dukun, but either Maddie's brother did not feel it appropriate, or more likely he did not have the respect of the desa. Maddie had pointed out some derogatory comments inscribed on the lane by our home, suggesting that he was not a true Muslim. This may relate to his rumoured role in the murders in the desa all those years ago, even though his own family were also victims. Maddie's Duke and brother said that we needed to put gold in the roof of our house, but Maddie immediately saw through this. One of the brothers' specialities was susuk. This places gold needles or small gold jewels under the skin, usually of a lady, to make her more attractive. Maddie had seen her sister-in-law selling the gold in the Desa Gold Exchange the next day. If only I'd thought quicker. I already had some fake gold bullion that I had in hand in case Indonesia became unsafe again. It would have been so funny to see Maddie's sister-in-law being told that the gold was mere plate and that they weren't rich after all. Mas Perwa later confided in me that he was having some marital problems known as bleep dysfunction. I immediately gave him some pasak bumi and some minyak bullets, which is said to increase the size of any organ it is applied to, that I had bought in Mirota. Pasak bumi is a wonderful herb, habitually used in Indonesia, which boosts testosterone, and the bleep benefits take a little while to take effect. But middle-aged men often notice they become far less grumpy within a week, assuming this could be construed as a desirable effect. This is the reason for Indonesian males supposedly having bigger members than their neighbours. Obviously such problems are not uncommon in men of his age, myself included, during my unhappy and celibate relationship prior to meeting Maddie. I should add that this celibacy was enforced by my then partner, who refused me bleep the moment she became pregnant with Branwell. There is something of a cultural imperative in Indonesia, with many men irregularly making love to their wives, which subsides to not making love at all once the wife reaches the menopause. In Indonesia's cities and towns, males will frequent commercial bleep workers rather than pay attention to their own wives. Islam has attempted to address this issue by allowing wives to demand bleep with their husbands on a Wednesday night, but many husbands shun their religious obligation. Gunung Kidul is a hilltop Kajawan Shrine to the northeast of Solo, dedicated to the legendary Prince Pangeran Samudoro and his stepmother Nia Ontaruwalan, with whom he eloped. Every 35 days, when the Javanese calendar coincides with the Gregorian Friday, to Westerners a Thursday night, rituals are performed at the site. Many people from Java would visit Gunung Kidul to engage in adulterous sex 7 times with the previously unknown partner, as it was believed to bring great riches to them. Although adultery is considered haram within Islam, it is something of a national pastime in Indonesia. Indeed, a number of people who had been on the Hajj pilgrimage would also pay homage at the shrine. Many of the men from Made's Desa took this pilgrimage, never with their partners knowing the true reason for their trips. The date coincides with the pilgrimage, or Zayariya, to nearby Pangaratis beach to venerate Gunung Kidul, providing a useful alibi. Inevitably, in Indonesia's liberal economy, with such high numbers of pilgrims, spawned a large number of businesses catering for the pilgrims' needs, as they do around the shrines of Catholic saints in the West. Also inevitably, from about 1990, this included small-scale commercial bleep businesses, with Gadis Malam and bleep acts becoming increasingly public, falling foul of Indonesia's strict pornography laws. An Australian documentary called Bleep Mountain created a moral panic in Indonesia, and many of the businesses related to the site were closed by the governor, despite some of the rooms facilitating prostitution being built by local government, which along with the entrance fee were a major revenue stream. During Suharto's regime, commercial bleep businesses had flourished, often seen as a means of reducing informal prostitution. The situation was seized on by the army as an additional source of income. During this period, girls found guilty of street prostitution would be rehabilitated in the army's correction centres. Even today, public accounts appear to show only a small part of the army's resources come from government disbursements, although I'm at pains to point out that I am not suggesting that today any of this money comes from illegal activities. About a week after I'd given Mas Perwa my herbal medications, he said that they hadn't worked, and I told him to give it time, also giving him a small kris that I'd bought at the market in Jogja that I'd anointed in sandalwood oil. About a month later, I heard that Mas Perwa was distraught. His daughter has announced that she was marrying a boy from up the mountain, and not one of his son's army friends, as he had hoped. In spite of my comments about Indonesia's appetite for extramarital bleep, such vices are regulated in rural areas by local youth groups who demand money for community causes to turn a blind eye, or that the lovers should marry. It would appear that this is exactly what had happened, and lacking the money to make a contribution, they opted for marriage. The Desa boy was part of a gang, Preman, from up the mountain that had attempted to extort money from us when we started building our home. The gang had used Javanese adat traditions in their crude attempts to extort money from me, in a similar way to my Dukan brother-in-law's family were stretching the boundaries of charity and generosity. Such attempts always begin with the statement, "You don't understand the Javanese or the Indonesian way," which actually means try to comprehend the deep cultural significance of being scammed. It ended when it was discovered that their leader was yet another of Made's relatives, and therefore deferent to the family, and especially its Dukan head, whom he feared. Nevertheless, they had a reputation for getting drunk on Chui bootleg and terrorising the Desa and further afield. I say it ended. then, but around 18 months later, the leader died. Despite being a young man, and Maddie made a small donation to the family, and for once it really was small. In popular culture, the Preeman hold positions similar to that of a gangster rappers, although are more associated with heavy metal type music, also called Preeman. Their paramilitary style organisation is often abused by politicians and even the state. Indeed, they were central to the independence movement. But their antecedents go back as far as the Matram Kingdom, providing an important social structure to a weak state. This developed under the Dutch and Japanese, and which is maintained today. So Preeman regulate market trade, ensure the flow of traffic at intersections, as traffic lights are rare and frequently ignored, street parking, and a host of minor interactions regulated by the state in most countries. A recent innovation in the Cinetron formula is to include a highly stylised Preeman as a comical figure based on Semar Messam, the mystical character popular in Wyong. Often based on ethnicity, Preeman also provide a mechanism for rural migrants to integrate into a city in which there is no social security. In this role, they are a little like self-help and business organisations, such as the Rotary Club or Freemasons. Many Indonesians see Preeman as providing an important social function, and that their abuse of power is certainly no more than that by the state. Had I strayed into using forces I didn't understand? One explanation is the gang had contacted us after hearing about our plans from Maspera. We didn't believe he'd done anything wrong, apart from maybe boasting that his daughter's boyfriend that he knew of a bule bringing money into the desa. Was the Chris assisting me in seeking revenge, even though I had never wished it, or even felt I had been wronged, and certainly not by Maspera, who had also experienced threats from the gang. The Umber had said that Maddie should come to Gunung Kidul immediately, as she was in grave danger, having said that foreign bodies removed from Bude's leg would have crippled her within a month. It was the weekend and too late to arrange a flight, or at least an inexpensive flight. In any case, we had collected many furnishings and household items that needed taking to our home in the mountains, so we called Om Susilo. Not only is this typical of Dukan, it's typical of Indonesians, who tell you that you must do things with no time to spare, but no thought of the difficulty, inconvenience and the expense this entails. The journey to Gunung Kidul follows the same route as that to Banyumas, but continues on the non-existent toll road to Semarang before sweeping south towards Solo. Being Friday, it took even longer to get out of Jakarta, but we were getting used to this, and we were soon in Kundal near Semarang. But it wasn't soon at all, it was over 10 years. Why have I picked up the exaggerations used in tourist brochures? I'll be saying next, we stopped for refreshments near the charming. I remember telling Maddie about Kendal in Cumbria, somewhere I knew well and with fondness, after Carl, a friend from Wigan Casino, had moved there. I have fond memories of an afternoon spent in the White Hart pub, endlessly playing the OJs, She Used to Be My Girl, on the jukebox, high on Potter's asthma cigarettes. Along with everyone we met that afternoon, you'll be saying, I didn't know you could get high on Potter's asthma cigarettes. Well, you can if you eat them, but don't try this at home. The side effects are extreme and last for days. But this Kundal was really an industrial suburb of Semarang, devoid of a White Hart. On the return journey, Kundal was full of young punk rockers called Anak Punk. I have no idea why they were there, but they did rather brighten up this industrial suburb. By morning we were in Boyolali, where Susulio's brothers seemed to be the mainstay of the local police force. Despite being close, it took a long time on Gunung Kidul's mountainous roads to get to Maspredipta's Desa, which was near the coast and nearer Kidul. Maddie seemed to have burped the entire time from Kundul to the Desa. In other words, across the breadth of Java. But that was surely an exaggeration. Nevertheless, she was expelling an awful lot of malevolence. Maspredipta's mother lived in an old, simple house. She was obviously kind and hospitable. We had had some doubts about Maspredipta, not least after Bude received a call from an unknown female in Gunung Kidul, claiming that Maspredipta had wronged her. Nevertheless, Maspredipta always seemed as charming as his mother, and Bude clearly loved him. So we resolved to forget about what we had heard and to support him and Bude. Umba's home was much like Maspredipta's mother, except she lived there with her children and grandchildren. Before going, we had to buy cigarettes for her and collect the same leaves Maspredipta's sister was feeding to the goats. I offered Umba a cigarette and everyone laughed. She didn't smoke. They were for the spirits that entered her. As we waited for the appointed time of our consultation, I noticed strange movements within the house, although on reflection they were probably the intermittent reaction of sunlight penetrating through small construction gaps and hitting smoke from the kitchen. The time came for Umba to call on the spirits. We entered her bedroom and offered some Islamic prayers. She then went into a trance and woke as Sultan Hamengkubuwana the Ninth, I think, as apparently she was entered by many spirits, accumulating in President Sukarno. I'm sure of this, as the visitation ended with 3 cries of Merdeka, freedom. Whoever Umbar was, they chain-smoked the entire time. So that was who the cigarettes were for. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Pia Telad Dishadan. Maddie was asked to remove her clothing, except for her knickers and a kine, a cotton cloth, often used like a sarong, but simply meaning cloth, as she lay on Umba's bed. Umba, whoever she was now, studied the leaves and ran her hands about 10 centimetres away from Maddie's body. Every so often she would stop and investigate further, sometimes pulling small larvae from Maddie's body, mostly white, but some were black, before placing them onto the leaves. Around 30 were removed from my wife, who was told that she was cured and she could go back to Jakarta, whereas Bude must stay around for further sessions. The larvae were intricately wrapped with flowers in the leaves and tied in small bundles, which we threw into a river running to near Kidul. Maddie was given a garland of leaves and flower petals, which she was told to boil and drink, but basically she was cured. She certainly felt much better. I chose my time to explain that the larva had obviously been on the leaves, and that I didn't believe for 1 minute that Sultan Hamengkubuwana the Ninth and President Sukarno had entered Umbar, not least as I expected she did have some powers and was well intentioned. Umbar's normal clients from the Desa probably expected something a little more dramatic than Pa Angabaya's quiet reassurance and prayer. So she had developed this act to convince them that something was happening. Although she may well have known Sukarno, who following the Dutch reoccupation of Jogja had established training camps in the area, and a connection to the Sultan is not improbable. I was, however, also concerned that the insights Umbar had were only in the presence of Bude, who is somewhat susceptible to suggestion. but Umba's insights about Pa and Ibuerte were extremely detailed, considering she would not know them or anything about them. Unless, that is, she had been briefed by somebody, possibly attempting to put us off the trail. That night, Cecilio slept in our home in the mountains with the door open. We all laughed at an ex-Marine officer being so frightened, but he clearly was. I raised my scepticism regarding Umbar the next morning as Bude and Maddie's symptoms began to return, only slowly and not as before. I insisted that Bude and Maddie join me at their mother's grave, but this time without their brother. As always, we first visited the father, and once again I felt nothing. But her mother awoke, claiming to be very tired. For some reason she didn't recognise her two daughters. When I told them, they not unnaturally seemed hurt by the information. Memories are strange things. What we believe we have seen, heard, touched, tasted or smelt so often prove to be false, or at least unverifiable by the scientific method. All was put right when Maddie's mother came to visit us. She loved the new home and was very happy I had built it on the same spot where she had once lived. She apologised for not having recognised her daughters and said that she was very tired, but we should not worry. We stopped off at Cecilio's parents-in-law on the way home. They were so different from the residents in nearby Gunung Kidul. Much more, dare I say, normal. Maybe their differences was simply that they were wealthier. But just maybe it was because Kidul's influence had waned by Boyolali. This made us late in setting off on that Sunday, and we got caught in all the traffic, stopping off in Brebes for Nasi Padang, along with what seemed like half of South Jakarta. Nasi Padang is literally cooked rice from Padang in Sumatra, the name given to Indonesia's most popular regional cuisine and takeaways. Given that it's somewhat spicy, it is the equivalent of Pakistani kebabs in the north of England. Brebes achieved some notoriety as a result of the queues at the end of the toll road last Lebaran, the Eid al-Fitr holiday at the end of Ramadan, when nearly everyone returns to their home kampungs. Known as Lebaran Mudik, it is estimated that 6 million leave Greater Jakarta for Mudik and 6.7 million return, adding to the city's overcrowding. A large proportion of the population who live in Jakarta are originally from Java. Most would pass through the Brebes exit, as the northern toll route is the only feasible road. The northern toll road divides into a central toll road, which would take you beyond Bandung, but then the roads would become snaking, mountainous passes. There is also a military southern coastal road, but this is not open to the public. Night bus drivers are not so gullible and exit the toll road prior to Brebes and follow a mountainous winding road rather than be stuck at the toll booths with everyone else. Some people were stuck for 36 hours in the queues, and 15 died of heat exhaustion and carbon monoxide poisoning. Years later, it took Widiati and Titi over 24 hours to travel from Jogja to Jakarta, one Mudik. During the debacle, the toll road operators kept manning the toll booths, greatly exacerbating the problems, as did the number of vehicles unable to get to the front of the queues for petrol before their air conditioners had emptied the tanks. Was this evil? Absolutely not. Profit maximisation is a legal obligation for companies, but more effective regulation, even talk of corporate liability, would allay some of my misgivings. This was around the time of the UK's Brexit vote, so Indonesians quickly hit on the term Brexit to mean Brebes exit. This stretch of road and the toll booths are part of a state-owned enterprise and therefore are a public asset and their obligations a public liability. Long before the Brexit catastrophe, these assets were sold by politician Abouzriel Bakri to the MNC Group, owned by politician Harry Tanosinodibojo, a friend of President Trump's, who then sold them on to the state, all illustrating the symbiotic interrelationship between large private and public enterprises in Indonesia. The whole episode of Indonesia's Brexit and the lack of response and coordination probably explains more about Indonesia than any business briefing could ever hope to. Maddie's pains and heat returned as before that Monday in Jakarta, although Bude continued to have objects removed by Umba many times. Every time they were removed, she seemed much better and Maddie much worse. Umba later told us that whilst Ibu Erti had paid for a Dukan Santat, Pa Erti knew how to send, or at least resend, a tax by himself without a Dukan's assistance. Well, I hope you enjoyed this chapter. By all means, feel free to comment on it, including criticism, as that's the only way I can improve. Now, I really do hate it when channels keep badgering you to subscribe for them, but I suppose it does tell you when I'm going to post new chapters. I'm aiming to do this every week to 10 days, so it might be a good idea to subscribe if you want to. But thank you again for listening.